So one Republican who's a little less fixated on the darkness and trying to embrace the mantle of Reagan and create a little daylight with Donald Trump is the former Vice President Mike Pence. And in an interview yesterday on Fox Business, Pence was asked about his comments from this past weekend's annual Gridiron dinner in Washington. Pence said there, quote, history will hold Trump accountable for the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Let's look at what he said yesterday.
This is the toughest statement you've made. Any particular reason why you made it last Saturday? Any particular thing on your mind?
Well, Larry, I've read that it's the toughest statement I've made, but it's essentially what I said in my book. It's essentially what I've been saying around the country for the last year and a half. Look, you know me well. I'm a look out the windshield guy, not a rear view mirror guy. But frankly, while the president and I parted amicably at the end of the administration after that tragic day in January, ever since he returned to the rhetoric he was using leading up to January 6th, I've been speaking out. I had no right to overturn the election. No vice president in American history has ever asserted that right.
Do you think former President Trump incited violence or incited an insurrection?
Well, look, there was a riot at the Capitol that day, and there were many causes. I do think that the president's reckless words that day endangered all of us that were at the Capitol. When I say my family, you know, my wife and my daughter were with me all the way until 4 in the morning the following day. But thanks to law enforcement, we quelled the riot. We were able to reconvene the Congress the very same day and complete our work under the Constitution of the United States. But I'll let history be the judge of those matters, and the American people can each have their own opinions.
Well, I mean, you know, I actually had heard, Jonathan Lemire, that he didn't go far enough and that he was, I don't know what they wanted him to do, get a picture of Donald Trump and tear it in half. I mean, he pretty much covered what he said before. He didn't set Trump on fire there, but he did say, and he said correctly, I've said it in my book, I said it there, he endangered my family's life. So I'm sure there's some things in there that we can find where he could have been more forceful. But that certainly is, as far as I've heard anybody go that's running for president of the Republican Party this year.
Yeah, he did say in that interview that there were many causes of the violence of January 6th, as opposed to just putting it on Trump. But you're right. He's going further than anyone else in the Republican field, any other potential candidate has done in condemning what Trump did to fuel the violence on January 6th. And we should read from conservative columnist Jonah Goldberg, who has a new piece from the Los Angeles Times that's titled, "Following the Law on January 6th was the least Pence could do. Why are we praising him?" He writes in part this: "While I'm glad and grateful for what Mike Pence did, some of the praise feels excessive. If all your friends decide to rob a bank, but you refuse to go along, that's great. But there's no heroism in choosing not to rob a bank. After all, not all painful choices are necessarily hard choices." That's what makes his show of anger at Trump now so discomforting. He says history will hold Donald Trump accountable for the events of January 6th. I am confident he's right. But it will take longer for that to happen because Pence has little interest in helping history reach its conclusion. Shouldn't someone running for president be able to tell the truth and vent his anger without so much hemming and hawing and political calculations? So, Mara, we have the other vantage point there. Pence has certainly received, he has some praise for what he said last weekend. We should note, though, and Jonah's sort of getting to this point, that he did so off camera, and he does so while still refusing to cooperate with any of the investigations into January 6th or what Donald Trump did that day.
Yeah, it's hard to see this as kind of fully coming clean, and it's really not encouraging when we're looking at Donald Trump running for president again, potentially being indicted. You know, he can't do, if he did commit any crimes, it's hard to do that as president on your own. And so we really want to have some faith in this democracy. The democracy is going to rely on individuals like former Vice President Mike Pence doing the right thing. So I think, you know, hopefully Americans of both parties can see a little bit more from him, a lot more. I mean, it's about personal integrity. It's about the integrity of the democracy. And we saw how close we came on January 6th. Really how close to the brink we came. And it was only the actions of individual officers, of people like Mike Pence, and of course of former Speaker Nancy Pelosi and others who really kind of rescued and saved the day. So we need to see more. It's I would say, not good enough.
You know, it's Jen Psaki, it's our Ashley Parker. It's fascinating. It's fascinating how history looks back on massive events. I've read, like old guys like me, read a lot of books about Winston Churchill. And one consistency throughout Churchill was one mistake after another mistake after another mistake. His best friend saying when Churchill's right, he's wonderful. When he's wrong, my God. And I just think about when people look back at this era, I don't think they're going to be looking at March 17th, 2023. I think they're going to look back at January 6th, 2021, and see what decisions were made on that day. And by that measure, it's crazy. History is going to record that Mike Pence was a guy that stood in the gap with an assist. Here's a footnote from Dan Quayle, who said to him, you can't do that. I mean, it's remarkable how history calls on people in time to do things. But you've studied the Republican Party, this Republican Party so well. Chances are really good, Ashley. That's not going to do him a lot of favors in Iowa and New Hampshire, is it?
Well, there's two things. The bet that the Pence, campaign, once it launches, is making is that this is a pivotal, seminal moment for him, where people, not just potentially some Democrats, some moderates, but more moderates in the Republican Party, will say that they appreciate Mike Pence holding the line, doing the right thing, and as he states, as someone also, again, who is trying to position himself very clearly as sort of the, not successor, but the return to Reagan republicanism following the Constitution. The challenge he has is that is a very fine line to thread. As you saw in that op-ed, there's also going to be a lot of people who will say, doing that, doing this basic thing of following the Constitution and not falsely overturning an election that Trump did not win, that you did not have the authority to do, is just that. It's the very bare minimum. But it is a huge moment, as you say, in history. It is a huge moment where Mike Pence, while a mob of pro-Trump supporters were chanting to hang the vice president, while there were nooses out on the National Mall, did make what at that time, though it may have seemed in retrospect a very obvious decision, a very clear constitutional decision, what for many people, especially people who had served former President Trump, could have been a very difficult decision, and he made it.
I just have to add in here, because I was there at the Gridiron, and what he said, he got a round of applause, which was deserved. But let's remember, on the political front with Mike Pence, he probably would not have been reelected governor of Indiana. I mean, Donald Trump, all the things that are terrible about Donald Trump sort of plucked him from potential political obscurity. So he is not a person who has was a skyrocketing political leader at the time when he came into the Trump administration. Now, since then, well, he did make those comments. He did write it in his book. How he talks about this strikes me as somebody who is observing this moment in history, not as somebody who played a pivotal role in this moment in history. Some good, some I think not as good. And that's the piece about it that I think is a little bit of a reflection of him. He's trying to walk this tight wire, and really, he could choose to participate. He could have chosen to participate with the January 6th committee. He could choose to share more about what he knew. He could speak out about it more. That is courage. I'm not sure that he deserves endless plaudits for speaking at the Gridiron and writing in his book.
All right, Jen Psaki and Jonah Goldberg. They agree on this one. All right. Thank you so much. The Washington Post's Ashley Parker. Greatly appreciate it. And also member of the New York Times editorial board, Mara Gay. Thank you as well. Greatly appreciate it.